what our goal is for this session is really to help our buyers agents generate more income in less time, right? So they've gone through a series of training where they've learned about doing a needs analysis and a buyer presentation. So I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna put you guys on the seat here. What's the primary goal of doing the needs analysis?
To save the client's time.
It's all part of it, yep.
Set expectations.
Set expectations. What else?
Finding the why.
Yes, that is what I'm looking for. So you want to understand exactly what's motivating them, and once you're clear on their motivation and their goals and why their goals are important to them, then you have the ability to move on to the process. So for us, when we do the process, our focus is really on educating them and going through the buyer, what we call the buyer process, but it's really a presentation. And my team knows I'm sensitive to calling it a presentation because I never want someone to feel like we're selling them. I want them to feel instead like we're educating them and we're helping them feel more comfortable. So for everybody out there, once you've accomplished those two things, the biggest thing that I've experienced in my career, and I've helped hundreds of buyers, is sometimes they ghost you. Sometimes when you send them out the door, you think you have a great relationship and they never call you back and you never take them to show a home. Can we all agree that that's a problem that we experience?
Yes.
Right? So when I was starting out, most of my business was focused on the buy side. And I needed to figure out a system and process and structure to increase my conversion and reduce my time showing them houses that they weren't really going to buy, and increase the amount of money I could make in the time I was putting in. Make sense? So that's how we developed the reality check analysis. So what is it? Do you guys have any ideas? Have you done any training on it yet? So you have a rough idea. So essentially, you're showing the client what's sold in the time frame that they want to buy. So if they're looking to buy in the next 30 days, they're studying the past 30 days of inventory that match their criteria. If they want to buy in 90 days, you're studying the 90 days of inventory. If they want to buy in a year, you're studying 90 days of inventory. Why?
Market changes.
Market changes, right? So we need to study what's recent and relevant. And that, if they study what's sold first, 99% of real estate agents send them out into the world and they say, it was so nice to meet you, take a look at what's active. If they're really good at what they do, they say, you know, if you see something, let's pre-schedule the next showing. How many of you try and book an appointment from an appointment? Right? That's a really obvious tip. But if you can't accomplish that because they haven't looked through what's available on the market, you don't know if what they want exists. And some of you know because you know the market, but if you tell them, hey, it was so nice meeting you today, by the way, you can't have what you want without showing them, you're going to lose them many times, right? Because they don't want to hear the truth when it's not what they want to hear, right? Can we all relate to that? So what we've done is said, okay, if we study all the criteria, we look at what's sold in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and we help the client identify what they would buy, there's a couple common things that happen, right? They'll identify what they would buy if they could change it so it's not next to the dumpster, or if it wasn't in this location but it was in this location, or if it was $100,000 cheaper, then they would buy it. Can we all relate to that? So what we do is a pretty simple equation, and I'm going to ask my team first, what are the things that you can adjust if what they're looking for does not exist?
Price.
Price is one.
Type.
I have a little thing to show you guys too. Green. Okay, so price, home type, location, and features, right? So this is the quadrant. Essentially, if you're trying to move someone's expectations, you have to have a process for moving their expectations, or they just feel like you're telling them no and that they can't have what they want. So for us, it's about enrolling them in the process and having them look at the options. And for many of them, they're going to look at the options and something does exist that they want. But the actual steps of doing this, if you know that these are the things that can impact their search, and I'm going to actually show you on the screen here in our MLS, and I recognize for some of you that are out there, your MLSs are very different. but this should give you a guideline so that you know what to do in your own MLS. Okay, so let's pretend we have a client that is looking for a home, and again, we're gonna focus on sold first. So a lot of you would go and set up an active search. Before joining our team, how many of you, the next step when you met with the client was setting up the active search and seeing what they wanted to go look at? Everybody in the room, right? So if we say, okay, we're going to look at what's sold, what was the date 90 days ago?
You just put 90 plus.
90 plus? Awesome, okay. So if we're looking at that they want a detached home, they want a 2-car garage, I'm gonna go through the standard Arlington request, right? They want 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, and they have a certain location that they want to be in proximity to Clarendon, let's say. For those of you who are out there that your price point is not in line with exactly what our price point is, I'm sorry. But this can apply in any price range in any market. It's, again, just a process. So, okay, let's imagine for the sake of this conversation that they tell you they want to be walking distance to Clarendon. Can everybody on my team relate to that client?
Yes.
That this is their goals, especially people who are relocating from out of the area, right? So let's say that they want to be walking distance to the Clarendon Metro, all right? So what you want to do first when you're showing them the results, you never want to put the price range in there, ever. You want to show them so that they understand the market. Based on their criteria, the range is 1469 up to 1817, right? So here's the range of what they're looking for. Now, once you identify, okay, here's the range, and you know that their price range was 800,000, you know if you did it the traditional way and you showed no active listings, and you sent them off into the world and you said, okay, well, when something comes up, let's talk. Or you said, I'm sorry, but what you want doesn't exist. The reaction that you would get wouldn't be a positive one, right? You'd essentially be squashing their dreams and telling them that they can't have what they want. So instead with this process, what you're doing is showing them what is factual. And one of the questions I'll ask is, okay, so I know that this is your ideal situation. And going back to their why, I know that you're relocating from Texas, or I know that you're having a baby, and so living in the condo that you're living in is just not going to work for you guys once the baby comes in 4 months, you know, whatever the time frame is. So let's just have a look here and figure out what we can adjust to make what you're looking for still accomplish all your goals and be possible. So that's where really digging deep and understanding the need behind the need is important, because yes, they want to be in Clarendon, yes, they want to be below 800, yes, they want a single family home, and they want a 2-car garage and 5 beds and 4 baths. Those are all things that they want. But if they keep looking for that, how long will they be looking? Forever. And the old way of doing it was you go pick them up on a Saturday, you cart them around in your car, and you try and find some way of resetting their expectations. So for me, when I was working with tons of buyers, I'm like, this is not gonna work. And people in this area, and probably in most of the areas you guys are in too, you know, they have kids and they have families and they have lives and they have work. The last thing they want to do is waste their Saturdays, no offense to any of us, but hanging out with us. They want to find what they want to find and move on. And we want them to do that too. So what we do with this process is basically you as the agent already know what needs to change about their criteria to get them in a house that's going to match the most of their needs, right? So Chelsea, your example today, knowing when to take them back. This is just helping them get there up front, okay? So in this particular situation with this criteria, what would be something that would be most important if they're at 800 and they wanted to be walking distance to the metro and they wanted a single family? How would you put them at choice to get them more options with this criteria?
Find a different metro.
That's a great idea. Find a different metro. What else?
Maybe just a 1-car garage. Something with the ability to build a garage later.
Those are my exact 2, okay? So if you looked at, and I don't know if you guys can hear them very well, but if you looked at it and you said, you know, what do you like about the Clarendon Metro? oh, we like that it's walking distance to restaurants and shops and, you know, blah, 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 it's an easy commute to work. A lot of times people are picking because it's where they live now and it's where they're comfortable. But what the attributes of that location that they like exist in other places, right? So a lot of times what I do, instead of just saying, well, here's the list, what do you guys want to change? That doesn't work. But if you say, you know, let me ask you something. Amy, I'm going to pretend like you're the buyer. You know, Amy, I know that it's important to you to stay in a price range where you're comfortable, and you really like a lot about Clarendon. You like the restaurants, the shops, you like that you can walk to the Whole Foods, right? And you like the idea, I'd reiterate all of the things you told me. Let me ask you, if you had to choose between keeping the restaurants and shops and staying within your budget, but looking at a metro stop that's a little further away in order to be less expensive and get you in your budget, would you rather increase your budget or change the location?
I'd like to consider changing the location, see what options there are there.
Okay, fantastic. So what locations do you think you might also like?
Well, I know there's the Orange Line. I like the Orange Line. I'm familiar with it. And I know it goes as far out as Falls Church. So
okay. So let's take a look at
some neighborhoods there that I could consider.
Fabulous. Okay. So what we would do on our end, we're always turning the computer back to ourselves to see what options we open up, right? So I know based on her criteria, I'm still not going to put in the price range, because if I do that, I could end up in a situation where I'm not showing her any more results. So this whole area is along the Orange Line. But the other thing we didn't talk about yet is if there's a situation where she would be willing to take the bus or not walk to the metro. We haven't actually figured that out yet. So in our needs analysis, we would know a lot more. Now, when we look at this, let's just see what kind of results we get. The other thing that we all know in our location is the 2-car garage is a big deal, especially when it's a 2-car garage and you're looking for a single family. So I might ask her something like this. You know, Amy, if we were able to get you in a location really close to the metro like you want, and walking distance to the shops and restaurants, but instead of being in a single family home, you were in a townhome, would you prefer to have that or a location that's even closer? Or I might do it, would you prefer to have the townhome, or would the 2-car garage be something you would be willing to give up in order to have a single family?
I mean, I could consider a townhouse because I know there are townhouses that have garages.
So the garage would be more important to you than a single family versus the townhome?
Probably so, because walking to the metro is also really key for me.
Okay.
I don't want to drive. I don't want to take a bus.
Great.
Yeah.
So part of this exercise is you're prioritizing, right? You're figuring out what is actually really important to them so you know how to help them find the right thing. So if we go back to our criteria here, even with the last change that we made, our least expensive home is still 1428. Now, most of the time, you know where someone's comfort zone is, and you also know what's the max price that they're willing to pay, right? So let's just take a look. None of these options are working right now, but if we said, okay, the townhouse is an option, then all of a sudden we go,
maybe I don't need 5 bedrooms.
Okay, so let's talk features. So that's exactly what happens. They start working with you and saying, well, actually, let's look at this, because they see the results every time you do it and they go, oh, shoot, we're still not there. Okay, so you're saying, would a 3-bedroom if it had a basement work, or what are your thoughts there?
Yes, let's change it to 3+, because maybe 4 for the bonus, that would be great.
Okay, and what are your thoughts about the bathrooms?
Bring it to 2+. Probably.
Okay, great. So now here we go. We just got to 28 matches. What is the likelihood that we'll go through this list and she'll find something that she would have bought?
Yeah. Right, yeah, more likely.
A
Right
lot
off the
more
bat.
likely, right? But let's imagine that we still weren't getting to 28 results, because how many times are people's expectations this far off? All the time. Right? They have no concept of the market. So the reason you do a reality check is actually dual purpose. It's because you want to enroll them in the process of actually getting to a realistic place. But it's also because once you do that and you pick out what they would have bought, you're also setting their expectations moving forward about the way the market moves. So I'm going to pick at random, knowing that they wanted to be in the 800 price range. Let's imagine she said she'd go up to 850 for the purpose of this conversation, but that would be her absolute max. She's not going to go $1 over 850. Okay. So based on her requirements, there were only 7 properties that matched her results. So what I'm going to do, and all of you in internet land, I don't know how your MLSs work, but the way that we do it, we pull stats. So, okay, let's just take a look and understand what happened with the pricing. Okay, the average listing was priced at $721 and sold at $719. Okay, that's good to know, right, for the client to understand. And then for me, I actually show them, okay, it looks like, and you guys aren't going to be able to see me, but here, I'll move this so you can. So, okay, this one sold for above the asking price. This was 100% of the asking price. This was slightly below. This was above. This was slightly below. This was 100% of ask, and this was 100% of ask. And when you look at the days on market, there's one outlier that's dramatically impacting the results. But we have 0 days, 4 days, 8, 13, 10, and then we have 2 outliers. So ultimately, what does that tell you? Go ahead.
I actually have a question, but in
Sure.
conjunction with the closed price and the list price, do you breach the subject of seller subsidy?
Sometimes.
That?
So the question is, do you talk about seller subsidy? And sometimes I do, because you want them to understand, if they are telling you, yeah, we think we're going to ask for all of our closing costs to be paid, and we're going to ask to close in 6 months, and we're going to write a really uncompelling offer, this is the time to really work through that with them. Not when they go to write the offer, right? So the problem is you've just done the needs analysis, then you've explained the whole process, now you're setting the expectations for moving forward and what houses you're going to go see, right? So it's getting lengthy. So it's always a delicate situation. How far do you keep going and how far do you push? And for me, when I hear their needs analysis, I know how I need to pace the presentation of the process, because if I don't get through this, then I have them walk out the door and they may ghost me like other people, or they may just wait for me to find the right property to show them and it might never happen. And once they go out the door, how much harder is it to set these expectations? So the temptation is to do it via email. What do you think I think about that?
Terrible idea.
Terrible idea. Thank you, Cooper. Yeah, it's a terrible idea, but you're thinking, oh my God, I want to be sensitive with their time, and you can tell that they're getting antsy. So what's important to do to get them to give you more time for this process?
Tell them you're going to cover it when you first meet with them? Are we?
Well, in my mind, you're kind of at the point where you've got the appointment.
Yeah.
So they're there, they're a captive audience, but they're getting antsy because they've been sitting there for a while. You need to re-enroll them. You need to tell them what's in it for them. And so ultimately, you know, Amy, I know you're a busy person and you have 4 kids and you have activities and you have grandkids and there's a lot you have on your plate. And so the last thing in the world you want to do is go home, try and find the property and figure out that nothing is matching what you're looking for and feel like you're wasting your time and spinning your wheels. So a process that we do is help you look at exactly what the options are now that have sold that match your criteria, so when you leave here today, you feel really confident that you know exactly where to look and you like the things that you're going to be finding. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Yeah, so busy people, when we talk about selling by disc personality, when we talk about selling to a D, why does a D want this?
Time
and
saving time and money.
Time and money, and they don't want to be taken advantage of. And if they don't know the market, so I only told half the benefit. But if I'm talking to a D, I'm going to say also, you know, no one wants to be taken advantage of. And the worst thing I think an agent can do is wait until you're ready to buy a house and then try and go over comps with you. That's not preparing you with knowledge in advance. I believe it's my duty to do that. And so I'd like to take another 10 minutes, 15 at most now, so we can have that conversation and have you feel really prepared when the time is right. Most of the time, they're going to make the time, right? And if they don't, and you have to schedule a next meeting, if they really have a hard stop, you want to schedule the next meeting to have that conversation in person right now. You don't want to let them do it over email and then let them float out in the universe not talking to you about it again, right? Because they get busy. it's hard enough to get them in the first time, which for us, we do buyer presentations. And we always do that to kick off the relationship, so we have expectations set. Okay. So once you've re-enrolled them in the process and you've gone through and you've showed them, here are the criteria, then what you're gonna do is just email them this, and you're also gonna email yourself a copy. You're gonna put the date and reality check analysis, right? If it's to yourself. Then, when you go to look at comps with them, when they find another home, what happens when they look at the first home and the very first home they see, they love? What's their biggest fear?
They haven't seen enough inventory.
Yes, so Drew, you've been here for a while. What do you do?
Do they feel like they haven't seen enough inventory?
Yes.
If you're showing them the house that you think they're going to buy and that they say that they like, but you think they're going to get scared, I always try to schedule a few other houses first, so they can see something else, and that way.
And then they have that to compare to. So he said, show a couple other homes first. That's a very good idea. What if there aren't a couple other homes? What if there's one home and they love it, but they're scared?
Well, you've technically shown them other inventory here
Yes.
by doing this reality check, so you can go back to that.
Absolutely. So that is exactly what I'm saying. So then when they say, yeah, but we haven't seen anything else. Well, you know what? 20 years ago, you would have been right. But today, you've actually looked at hundreds of listings already. You looked before you ever came to talk to me, and you already knew the options that you liked and didn't like. And then we sat down in my office and we went through all of the inventory that sold in the last 90 days, and you selected 4 that you really liked. And what you shared with me that you liked about them were blah, 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 blah. Let's look at them now and let's compare them to the house that we're in. This one actually does have the big backyard that you really liked. The 2-car garage was critical, and here we are, this home does have the 2-car garage and you can still walk to Whole Foods. Right, so then you start working on closing. That's a whole nother lesson that we're definitely gonna do. But focused on this process, you're armed with the information you need to close them in the moment if you do this. Does that make sense? So Cooper, if you're honest, how many times do you end up not doing this process even though you know you should?
More times than I would like to admit.
Okay. He said more times than he wants to admit. I'm sure that's only a few. So given that, why? What gets in the way? And I'm gonna have them listen to you because it's real. What you're saying is real.
Certain
right?
times, just the buyer. It's I try to read the buyer and do it that way, but in reality, it doesn't matter. Like my reading the buyer, like sometimes isn't the right.
So you make
solution.
assumptions,
Yeah,
and you think
exactly.
you can get them to buy without doing this process.
Yeah, and
okay.
And then later on down the line, when you are showing them houses, you realize that you're wasting both of your time. So
Yeah.
it's tough to you want to do it earlier than later.
Okay. What else? Kyle, you have any? By the way, this kid just ratified 5 contracts in a week, and one was on TJ Oshi's house. So way to go.
I'm gonna be very honest here. I was just texting because I had a client.
So you don't know the question I'm asking?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Because I had a client who was asking me something, but
No worries, you weren't in advance. So, question I'm asking is, why would you sometimes skip the reality check analysis?
Well, I guess if there's any point where you just don't know, you don't feel like you're giving value in doing it, or you don't know if you're doing it correctly, so why would you even feel the need to do it? And
Yeah.
then you would just skip it altogether. But otherwise, I mean, it would just be that you think that you getting foot to pavement is a better option than sitting down and doing what you may feel is like more of a time waster.
Yeah,
Then-
so you feel like you might be wasting your time and the client's time, and if you just focused on the actives, you could go out and sell them.
Maybe they'll go see a house, and the first house you show them, they'll want to buy, which never happens. But you might think like,
Well,
if
and
we
if
walk
it
in the
does
house, they'll buy
happen,
it.
you'd be better off having done this exercise
Right.
anyway,
Absolutely.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, so what I heard is you might feel like you're wasting their time, or that you don't know how to execute on this fast enough to make it valuable.
Right.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. Drew?
Well, I was
I'm
actually
picking on the people who've been here for a little while,
okay. Go ahead.
so, yeah, so what are your What are the reasons you wouldn't do it?
I think he made a good point where a lot of people come in and they say they know what they're looking for, and it pulls up a lot of results. So if there's something a little more realistic than an $800,000 5-bedroom house, so when their expectations are more realistic, it is harder to do this sometimes, just because there might be more inventory out there. There might be plenty of it on the market. And I have had a few times where people come in, they're like, I want this house. And you want to go in and do the right thing, and then they end up buying the house, and they just needed you to come in and help them, like, confirm that they're making the right decision.
Okay, so even if they're pretty sure what they want to buy,
yeah,
it's just pulling the comps, right?
It's getting over the feeling of it being a time waster, because if they end up being a difficult client, you will be glad you did this, and if they're an easy client, you only spent 15 minutes, and then you have an easy conversion.
Process of getting them to talk through the criteria of writing a winning offer. Okay. So what will help, would you say, for the ones who've learned this process before? Hopefully I'm not doing any more crotch shots. Sorry about that. For those of you who have, can't help myself. Those of you who have been here for a little while, what would you say to the new group to help them get comfortable overcoming some of the things you just brought up? And for the people out there who have never tried this before, what would you say?
Trust the process, because it does work, and you can see, like, it is valuable. So as long as you come in with that mindset of making sure that you understand that it's valuable, your clients will end up believing in just showing them. So I think it always works.
Okay. What if you're presenting, I'm going to go to the next two in a second, but what if you're presenting to somebody who's a high C personality?
It's still valuable, and just go through it like you're going through any other personality. It's up to them ultimately to decide whether or not it was worth it. So just do it, because it's most of the time you'd rather have gone through it and then not have to worry about it than having to explain it when you're in the house, in the 20th house, that you haven't found them anything that they liked.
Well, and to Drew's point, Drew said, hey, they already like a house, right? So why would we need to do it? But the reality is, if they already like the house, you're going to pull comps anyway. And if you do it up front and then they end up not buying that house, you're not back to square one, or they lose, right? Let's imagine that it's a competitive situation and they lose. Oh, now I'm at the ceiling. I mean, the sky's the limit, people. Okay, so clearly not good with the camera. Good thing we have Michael here. So, okay. So what else would you say to the people out there? What do they need to do? What do I teach you guys you need to do?
Well, for me, I would just say, like, practice is key with this, because if you are not doing it correctly, then there is no value to it. I mean, you will waste your time and their time, and you'll look unknowledgeable because you're fumbling around with it, and you're supposed to be the professional there, the expert. So, practicing with people or with yourself, or trying to come up with something that's unreasonable in the first place, and then see how you can do it yourself to kind of get it to a reasonable place, because you've got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, it just won't work.
Yep. So practice is absolutely critical, and I like what we do on our team. Am I actually getting myself here? Hey. Well, what we do on our team is come up with some scenarios that are common scenarios of topics that people are unrealistic about, and then we work together and we role play the whole example. So that's actually when we turn you guys off. What we're going to focus on next is pairing up, and I encourage you to get someone else in your market, get a family member or a friend, someone who's willing to be hard on you and treat you like a buyer, and walk through the whole thing and practice using this. And I actually show the client this. I'll draw it on a piece of paper and say, look, these are the different things that we're working with. If I know, because I'm a market expert, that a 2-car garage, if they just ruled that out, I would focus on why the garage is important to them and try and find another solution. So if they said something like, I just don't want to have to deal with snow, I might focus on, if there's a parking garage where if they know snow is coming, that they can park a block away and they don't have to worry about that, and they get to be in the location that they want. Because if I know what's going to motivate them to move is the location, then the way I address this is very different. Another thing that happens, a lot of times someone will tell you, I won't go $1 over 800. And then you show them, okay, the range to get what you want is $1 million to 1.5, and they're like, well, I could go up to 1.2. Like it's, and you could have been spending weeks showing them a bunch of dumpy stuff that they wouldn't buy in the 800s, and then they're at 1.2, and it happens in the same day. And you already started saying, how about a 4-bedroom? How about 2 baths, right? So the buyer starts contributing to the process when it's done correctly. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from any of you guys watching out there? I don't have any idea how many of you are out there, but Tyler's coming to help me since I'm technologically challenged.
But Drew had a question while I'm figuring this out.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, in a scenario where you first had a very unrealistic client who quickly turned into a realistic client, what do you recommend if someone comes in and generally has realistic expectations? Then there's plenty to look for that's in their budget and
awesome. I don't know if you guys can hear Drew, but he said, what if someone is realistic and they have a realistic expectation? So sometimes we suffer from the opposite problem, which is they're so realistic that there's so much inventory that you're thinking, oh my gosh, how are they going to narrow down? So it's better to be able to have the conversation with them and say, guys, this is amazing, and we can dig a little deeper. What else is important to you? Right? How would you use, let's just take a look, and if we narrowed by some other things, because they don't know the market yet. And so it's actually just as important to coach them in the opposite direction if they're being too flexible. Sorry.
We have a comment. I believe that was on something you were talking about a moment ago.
Oh, maybe an out-of-town buyer. Don't know. Is there any reason you should not do the initial consultation otherwise? Okay, cool. Thank you for the comment. If anyone else has questions or comments out there, please share. One thing on the high C, really quick. A high C, their biggest fear is being inaccurate or making a mistake. So you know when you're dealing with a high C because they tell you they're going to buy the home and then they change their mind, right? They're like, well, you know, we might need to see another 15 houses to be sure. Well, what they're really afraid of is making a mistake. So if you've already studied everything in advance and given them time to digest that information, you can go back to them and say, you know, I understand, like, buying a home is a huge decision and it's natural to be fearful of making a mistake. So I just call it out that way and acknowledge how they're feeling, because I already know how they're feeling because I know what their personality is, right? So once you know that, you use this exercise to go back through and say, you know, we've studied it closely, Amy. We know that there were only 7 homes that came up in the last 90 days that matched your criteria. And my guess is there are other people in the market that also want a 2-car garage and want to be able to walk to Whole Foods and want the same things that you do. So if you're afraid that in the future, what if you made a mistake and you're not able to sell it and you're not getting a good value, we've already studied that well in advance to make sure you're well positioned to get a great deal, to get a great value, however you want to say it. Does that make sense? So you have to anticipate their fear or concern and then address it head on. So in Drew's scenario, where it's somebody who they're really realistic, a lot of times they're afraid that they're going to miss out if they get more specific about what they want. So that you have the people who say, we're okay with the 2-bedroom, 2-bath. We could spend up to $1 million, and we'd like to be around Clarendon if that's possible, but we could be in Falls Church, or we could go to Alexandria, and if we had to go to Fairfax, we might do that. Like, okay, so for the next year, we could be reviewing the active listings, right? So you want to congratulate them. Hey, we work with a lot of clients that have really unrealistic expectations, and the great thing about the criteria that you're sharing with me is there are so many options that match that criteria. And what we've found is that if we don't help you narrow that criteria and get a little bit more specific about what you're looking for, the perfect home could come on the market and we could miss it with all the homes that aren't exactly perfect. So if the world were perfect, is there a location, would you be more concerned about location or home type, or what would be really important to you? And then you go through the exercise the opposite way, right? And you coach them on each of these things and get a little more clarity. Is Tyler's there? Something you're looking at? Oh yeah, bring your questions here. Cool. Thoughts? Other questions?
Question here.
Sure.
Could you tell us what the fears are for each of the disc personalities?
Yes, so the D and the C, because I'm a really high D, I relate to that one the most, right? So that's the fear of being taken advantage of or wasting time. Like, they do not want you to waste a second of their time. And so you have to learn how to say things in a really concise manner. And a high D doesn't want to talk about what you did last night and your family and your friends and where you ate, and like, that is a high I, right? So an I's biggest fear is not being liked. So they are the ghosters. They will sign the buyer agreement when you ask them to, because they don't want to hurt your feelings and they don't want you not to like them, but they may have been turned off by something that you did, and they'll never call you back. I used to charge $495 before I would work with someone. They would write me a check, to Remax of course. They would write me a check, and I would work with them after I had that level of commitment, and they would write me checks sometimes and then never call me again. It's like, wow, I just got broke up with and they paid me to break up with me. That's so bizarre, right? So I learned about ghosting that way.
Wow.
So when that happens, usually there was some rapport that wasn't built with an I, right? So an I might be afraid of who the neighbors are. They may not buy because they really care about connection, and they may not want to tell you they're afraid about who the neighbors are. I'll go knock on the doors with an I. Hey, let's figure it out. In fact, I had a buyer presentation that I sat in on yesterday with personal friends of mine that are relocating to the area from Germany, and that was one of their concerns. That how do they know that the kids at school are gonna be friends with their kid, right? So, okay, let's go visit the schools. So you can't tell them which schools are the best, but you can facilitate them having the right conversations to get comfortable. Okay. Then we said S. So S, I don't know exactly what the S's biggest fear is. I have a hard time relating to the S sometimes, but I believe that they care a lot about loyalty and that they care a lot about security. And so any kind of change, they are afraid of change. So if I had to guess, that it's probably change related. And so they also really care about aesthetics. So you want to take what's motivating them and specifically address, if the change is scary, why it will be worth it on the other side and what they're getting out of it. We have a lot of high S's on the team, believe it or not. A lot of our top salespeople started out as very high S's, and they are not high S's anymore because they've learned to be a lot more adaptable, but they value the relationships, they value the stability. So you want to make sure you're addressing that, because moving is a dramatic change. So if there's a reason to avoid it, they'll try. What other questions? Okay, are you guys ready to break out into groups and practice this? Now, practicing aloud, Kyle pointed out practice. Practicing aloud is very important, because if you don't practice having the words come out naturally and putting them at choice instead of just saying, what do you want to do, right? If you don't practice it for the actual concerns in your area, you don't deliver it smoothly, and it takes too long to get to the point. You need to be able to go through this whole exercise in about 15 minutes. Now, if they get really engaged in the exercise and there's 20 options, if you get them to the point where they have liked 2 or 3, that tells you that there's going to be enough, and you can let them go home and finish the rest of the exercise, okay? If you're going through and you're at number 10 and there's not one that they liked, is it valuable for you to finish in that moment? You're 10 in, they wouldn't have bought anything. Do you have to go through the other 10 if there's 20 options?
I would.
Yes.
I would.
Yeah.
Yes.
It might be 11. 11 might be the one.
Well, and there may be 0. And if there's 0, you're back to the circle.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to keep adjusting the expectations, or they're going to go out into the world and not find what they're looking for. So you absolutely have to keep adjusting the expectations. And sometimes you're so exhausted and you're like afraid for the client. And so there might be one option and you're like, thank God we found one, let's move on. No, no. If there's one that happened in 90 days, is there a chance they're going to miss out on that one and then they're not going to buy anything? Absolutely, and the market is moving up, right? So what you need to explain to them is, look, for us to get to a level of feeling good about this, you want to buy in the next 30 days. We're looking at the inventory in the last 30 days and only one, or 90 days and 90 days and only one worked. That's just, there's too much of a chance that we won't win on that one, or we'll miss out because other people are looking for what you're looking for. So would you rather look at increasing the budget by another 25 to 50,000, which the way I would communicate that is, you know, are you willing to spend an extra $50 to $100 a month to get exactly what you want, right? So if you break that into a payment, it's more chunkable and they're more willing to work with you. Somebody is asking if this is recorded, and I believe that it is, and we'll post it in the group, I think, right? Yes, yes it is. So we will definitely do that. Okay, any other questions? You guys ready to practice? And you guys out there, go practice. Find somebody, mother, brother, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, child. Practice and make them be hard on you, and make them really set unrealistic expectations. And the way that we do it, we write out in advance, here are the expectations that they go in with, and here's where they can be moved. Because the biggest problem is if you say to yourself, well, if they would just get rid of that 2-car garage, it'll work. And so you keep pushing them on the 2-car garage, and really that's their #1 priority, and that's not moving. So sometimes you pick the wrong thing when you as the agent have an agenda. You have to be really curious and ask great questions. Okay? All right, so guys that joined us from Lab Coat, thanks for coming. Hopefully it was helpful. And we'll talk to you guys later when I figure out how to turn it off.